Arati Govinda Hari Deva Gani Arati Govinda Hari Deva Arati Govinda Hari Deva Gani Nara Hari Hari Kori Samaradudaya Nara Hari Hari Kori Samaradudaya Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. let's start it.
Introduction. Yes. I'm not sure where we left off on the last class.
We'll feel it out. ॐ ज्ञानतिमरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपरकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादं सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी विश्वभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
We were on universal form, but I'm not sure if you went into chapter 12 or not.
We're on chapter 13, aren't we?
We are chapter 13 already?
That's what I thought. I know we finished universal form.
I'll look up the Saturday's class. You have to go towards the end, 90% of the class is cured.
What's that?
There's 627.
27 6
This
is
is 1320.
13?
31.
31, right? So anything afterwards?
Chapter 13,
Yeah,
31.
Okay, well, yeah, we can start at 1331 tonight. So. Chapter 13, verse 31. Yada bhuta pritag bhavam ikashitam anupashyate tata eva cha vistaram brahma sampadayate tada.
Translation: once a sensible man ceases to see different identities which are due to different material bodies, he attains to the Brahma conception. Thus he sees that beings are expanded everywhere.
Chapter 13, text 32. Anaditva nirgunatvat paramatmayam avyayah sharirosthopi kaunteya na karoti na lipyate. Translation: those with the vision of eternity can see that the soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled.
Text 33. Ita sarvagatam sakshmyad akasham no palipyate sarvatra vastito dehi tatatma no palipyate. Translation: the sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul, situated in Brahman vision, does not mix with the body, though situated in that body.
Chapter 13, text 34. Yata prakshasyati ekaha Jyotsnam lokam imam bravi Kesham keshuti tata krishnam prakyasyati bharata. Translation: O son of Bharata, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness.
Go back now.
Text 35. Kshatriya Shitra Yakyayor Evam Antaram Jnana Chaksusha Bhuta Prakriti Moksham Cha Eviduryanti Te Param. Translation: one who knowingly sees the difference between the body and the knower of the body and can understand the process of liberation from this bondage also attains the supreme goal.
Chapter 14, text 1. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Parambuya Pavakshayami Jnanaganam Jnanam Yutamam Yad Sarva Munad Yad Sarve Param Siddhim Ito Gata. Translation: the Blessed Lord said, again I shall declare to you the supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained to supreme perfection.
Text 2. Idam gnanam upashritya mama sadharmyam agataha sargepi nopajayante pralayena vyathanti cha. Translation: by becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature, which is like my own nature. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation nor disturbed at the time of dissolution.
Text 3. Mamayo nirmahad brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham sambhavha sarvabhutanam tato bhavati bharata. Translation: the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata.
Chapter 14, text 4. Sarvar yonishu kanteya murtarya sambhivantiya tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. Translation: It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father.
Text 5. Sattvam rajastamam iti kunha prakriti sambhavaha nibadhanti mahabaho dehe dehinam avyayam. Translation: Material nature consists of the three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the living entity comes in contact with nature, he becomes conditioned by these modes.
So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 times 2, that's 10. We've done 10. Why are we doing 11? I just think it's easier to just never do 10 at a time. That way, when we go back, we have a little bit of a clue. So, text 31, translation. When sensible man ceases to see different identities which are due to different material bodies, he attains to the Brahma conception. Thus, he sees the beings are expanded everywhere. Purport. When one can see that the various bodies of living entities arise due to the different desires of the individual soul and do not actually belong to the soul itself, one actually sees. In the material conception of life, we find someone a demigod, someone a human being, a dog, a cat, etc. This is material vision, not actual vision. This material differentiation is due to a material conception of life. After the destruction of the material body, the spirit soul is one. Spirit soul, due to contact with material nature, gets different types of bodies. When one can see this, he attains spiritual vision, thus being freed from differentiations like man, animal, big, low, etc. One becomes beautified in this consciousness and able to develop Krishna consciousness in his spiritual identity. How he then sees things will be explained in the next verse.
Text 32. Translation. Those with the vision of eternity can see that the soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. Purport. A living entity appears to be born because of his birth of the material body, but actually the living entity is eternal. He is not born, and in spite of his being situated in a material body, he is transcendental and eternal. Thus, he cannot be destroyed. By nature, he is full of bliss. He does not engage himself in any material activities. Therefore, the activities performed due to his contact with material bodies do not entangle him.
Text 33. Translation: the sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul, situated in Brahman vision, does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. Purport: the air enters into water, mud, stool, and whatever else is there. Still, it does not mix with anything. Similarly, the living entity, even though situated in varieties of bodies, is aloof from them due to his subtle nature. Therefore, it is impossible to see with the material eyes how the living entity is in contact with this body and how he is out of it after the destruction of the body. No one in science can ascertain this.
Chapter 13, text 34. Translation. O son of Bharata, As the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. Purport. There are various theories regarding consciousness. Here in Bhagavad Gita, the example of the sun and the sunshine is given. As the sun is situated in one place, but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle of spirit soul, although situated in the heart of the body, is illuminating the whole body by consciousness. Thus, consciousness is the proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is the proof of the presence of the sun. When the soul is present in the body, there is consciousness all over the body. And as soon as the soul has passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. This can be easily understood by any intelligent man. Therefore, consciousness is not a production of the combinations of matter. It is the symptom of the living entity. The consciousness of the living entity, although qualitatively one with the supreme consciousness, is not supreme because of the consciousness of one particular body does not share that of another body. But the supersoul, which is situated in all bodies as the friend of the individual, is conscious of all bodies. That is the difference between supreme consciousness and individual consciousness.
What text number was it? 35. Text 35, translation. One who knowingly sees this difference between the body and the knower of the body and can understand the process of liberation from this bondage also attains the supreme goal. Purport. The purport of the purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the knower of the body, and the supersoul. A faithful person should at first have some good association to hear of God and thus gradually become enlightened. If one accepts a spiritual master, he can learn to distinguish between matter and spirit, and that becomes the stepping stone for further spiritual realization. A spiritual master teaches his students to get free from the material concept of life by various instructions. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita, we find Krishna instructing Arjuna to free him from materialistic considerations. One can understand that this body is matter. It can be analyzed with its 24 elements. That is the gross manifestation. And the subtle manifestation is the mind and psychological effects. And the symptoms of life are the interaction of these features. But over and above this, there is the soul. There is also the super soul. The soul and the super soul are two. This material world is working by the conjunction of the soul and the 24 material elements. One who can see the constitution of the whole material manifestation and this combination of the soul and material elements, and also can see the situation of the supreme soul, becomes eligible for transfer to the spiritual world. These things are meant for contemplation and for realization. And one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of a spiritual master. Thus, and the Bhakti Vedanta proposed to the 13th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam or Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of nature, the enjoy and consciousness.
I'm reminded of a verse, if it's okay if I share. It's from Bhagavatam. I think it's definitely first canto. And it goes, Yata napasi me kalgo, renorva partivonile, evam drashtari drashtyatvam, aropitama buddhi dibihi. And it says, clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent men say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit self, meaning essentially the soul within the body is like the reflection of the moon in water. The moon itself appears to tremble in that reflection due to the ripples of the water. And soon after the sun rises, that reflection is no longer visible in that water. But the moon is still there, existing somewhere else. It's just that, due to its temporary reflection in the water, it becomes unseen to the observer. So similarly, this is the condition. Once we've been covered over by material nature, we no longer have the awareness of our true spiritual self, of the soul. And this is, we're hearing, this realization is revived through the relationship that we take with the spiritual master, which is so nicely exemplified in this book of Bhagavad Gita. I wanted to share that verse because I thought it was relevant. It's a nice one.
That's chapter 14, text 1. Translation, the Blessed Lord said, "Again, I shall declare to you the supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained to supreme perfection." Purport. From the 7th chapter to the end of the 12th chapter, Sri Krishna in detail reveals the absolute truth, the supreme personality of Godhead. Now the Lord himself is further enlightening Arjuna. If one understands this chapter through the process of philosophical speculation, he will come to an understanding of devotional service. In the 13th chapter, it was clearly explained that by humbly developing knowledge, one may possibly be freed from material entanglement. It has also been explained that it is due to association with the modes of nature that the living entity is entangled in this material world. Now, in this chapter, the Supreme Personality explains that those modes of nature are how they act, how they bind, and how they give liberation. The knowledge explained in this chapter is proclaimed by the Supreme Lord to be superior to the knowledge given so far in other chapters. By understanding this knowledge, various great sages attain perfection and transfer to the spiritual world. Lord now explains the same knowledge in a better way. This knowledge is far, far superior to all other processes of knowledge thus far explained, and knowing this, many attain perfection. Thus, it is expected that one who understands this 14th chapter will attain perfection.
Text 2. Translation. By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature, which is like my own nature. This established, one is not born at the time of creation, nor disturbed at the time of dissolution. Purport. After acquiring perfect transcendental knowledge, one acquires qualitative equality with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, becoming free from the repetition of birth and death. One does not, however, lose his identity as an individual soul. It is understood from Vedic literature that the liberated souls who have reached the transcendental planets of the spiritual sky always look to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, being engaged in his transcendental loving service. So, even after liberation, the devotees do not lose their individual identities. Generally, in the material world, whatever knowledge we get is contaminated by the three modes of material nature. But knowledge which is not contaminated by the three modes of nature is called transcendental knowledge. As soon as one is situated in that transcendental knowledge, he is on the same platform as that of the Supreme Person. Those who ha- those who have no knowledge of this spiritual sky hold that after being freed from the material activities of the material form, this spiritual identity becomes formless without any variegatedness. However, just as there is material variegatedness in this world, so in the spiritual world there is also variegatedness. Those in ignorance of this think that the spiritual existence is opposed to material variety, but actually, in the spiritual sky, one attains spiritual form. There are spiritual activities, and the spiritual situation is called devotional service. That atmosphere is said to be uncontaminated, and there one is equal in quality with the Supreme Lord. To obtain such knowledge, one must develop all these spiritual qualities. One who thus develops the spiritual qualities is not affected either by the creation nor or the destruction of the material world.
The total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharat. Purport: this is an explanation of the world. Everything that takes place is due to the combination of kshetra and kshetragya, the body and the spirit soul. The combination of material nature and a living entity is made possible by the Supreme God Himself. The Mahat Tattva is the total cause of the total cosmic manifestation, and because in the total substance of the material cause there are three modes of nature, it is sometimes called Brahman. The Supreme Personality impregnates that total substance, and thus innumerable universes become possible. This total material substance, the Mahat Tattva, is described as Brahman in the Vedic literature. Tasmadi tad brahmanam harupam anam cha jayate. Into that Brahman, the seeds of the living entities are impregnated by the Supreme Person. 24 beginning from earth, water, fire, and air are all material energy called Maha Brahman, or the Great Brahman, the material nature. As is explained in the 7th chapter, beyond this there is another, superior nature, the living entity. In material nature, the superior nature is mixed by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thereafter all living entities are born of this material nature. The scorpion lays its eggs in piles of rice, and sometimes it is said that the scorpion is born out of the rice. But the rice is not the cause of the scorpion. Actually, the eggs were laid by the mother. Similarly, material nature is not the cause of the birth of the living entities. The seed is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they only seem to come out as products of material nature. Thus, every living entity, according to his past activities, has a different body, created by this material nature, and the entity can enjoy or suffer according to his past deeds. The Lord is the cause of all the manifestations of living entities in this material world.
Chapter 14, Text 4. Translation. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. Purport. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original father of all living entities. The living entities are combinations of the material nature and the spiritual nature. Such living entities are seen not only on this planet, but in every planet, even in the highest where Brahma is situated. Everywhere there are living entities. Within the earth, there are living entities, even within water and within fire. All these appearances are due to the mother, material nature, and Krishna's seed-giving process. The purport is that the living entities, being impregnated in the material world, come out and form at the time of creation according to their past deeds.
Translation. What was the word? Text 5 translation. Material nature consists of the three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the living entity comes in contact with nature, he becomes conditioned by these modes. Purport. The living entity, because he is transcendental, has nothing to do with this material nature. Still, because he has become conditioned by the material world, he is acting under the spell of the three modes of material nature. Because living entities have different kinds of bodies, in terms of their different aspects of nature, they are induced to act according to that nature. This is the cause of the varieties of happiness and distress.
Any comments or questions at this point?
Hare Krishna. So there's the part of this last purport here to text 3 I really enjoyed about the scorpion laying its eggs in rice, and sometimes it looks like the scorpions are coming out of the rice. And the example is how like it looks like we come out of the material nature, but actually we're spiritual beings who are just in the material nature. So I really like that analogy. I'll it's a good note to keep, a good analogy. So thank you.
So I just want to add one point what you just mentioned, that we are not material beings on a spiritual journey, but we are spiritual beings right now on a material journey. So actually, that's a true constitutional position, that we are actually spiritual beings, but we are in a material journey. So therefore, it's through, chanting of the holy names, association, reading Vedic scriptures, that we can transcend and then revive our true consciousness. And that eventually will pave way towards helping us revive our true nature, that is Satchitananda, eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. That's what Krishna always talks about.
Chai. The Lord has a name. Is one of his names is Adhokshaja. Adhokshaja. This means he's beyond our limited sense of our limited range of sense perception. And similarly, he has so many multifarious energies, and these are also way beyond our capacity to really understand. So Queen Kunti, she prays Maya Javanakashanam Agyadokshajamavyayam Naivar Hatyablidatum by Twamakinchana Gocharam. And she says that the living entity, or that Krishna, he's the eternal, irreproachable factor, and he's covered by this diluting curtain of energy. So therefore, the foolish observer knows him not. Exactly like an actor in a play is not recognized, So similarly, this material energy in the situation that we find ourselves in, it's so easy to only base things off of what we can see, off of our limited sense perception. And this is really quite foolish, because as we hear, there's three ways to ascertain knowledge, or to process information. Is one is through like sight, through our direct sight. One is through speculation, and then the other is through hearing. And this is the most perfect way of really internalizing knowledge and realizing the topmost thing there is. Hearing from, once again, the spiritual master, or bona fide disciplic succession, who is carrying this truth all the way from the source itself, which is Krishna. So just to add on to some of the points that you Prabhu's made, I like this part too, of the scorpion appearing to be born out of the rice. It's crazy that we've based our whole entire scientific conclusion off of such speculation, and neglect of what really makes sense, which is that there's a personal God who's given way to us personal beings. So there's some thoughts.
Yeah, it's comes to material energy and science, and how everything's based off our senses, how we discover this stuff. I think atheist, being an atheist, takes a much greater faith to actually have that kind of faith, to believe that this all came from nothing. That's just mind-blowing for me, just trying to think this entire world, this entire reality came from nothing. To me, that's a greater leap of faith than believing that there's a supreme God. There's the supreme God that, pervades everything.
So, when you speak regarding, the so-called, what is it, theory? The black hole theory? Big Bang Theory, right? So there's a story in this context that Newton, who was a firm believer of God, had an atheist friend. So can I share that story? It's a short one. Yeah. So he had an atheist friend, and Newton, since he was much fascinated with having a planetary models, the friend visited him, and he saw a replica of the exact solar system. And then his friend, who was an atheist, asked him, like, "Hey, this planetary system looks quite amazing because it was kind of an working model with all the planets revolving and rotating around the sun in perfect axis and everything." Out of his curiousness, he wanted to know who was the person who has built it. Then Newton wanted to teach him a lesson. Then he said, "This planetary model, well, it came out of nowhere, nothing." Then the friend was like taken aback. So, come on, don't joke. Tell me seriously, what's the who made it? Because it is so properly like mechanized with perfect revolutions, rotations. It cannot happen by chance. Someone would be a designer behind it. Then Newton said the same thing. No, it has just come by chance. It's a chance theory. So the discussion went to and fro because Newton's main agenda was he wanted to teach him a lesson. And then he said, see, when you're not able to believe a simple fact that this small planetary system could come out of nowhere, there could have been a brain who has prepared it, then how can you assume that the entire gigantic universe, the Milky Way galaxies, the sun, universe, had our Earth been at least an inch closer, we would have like gone into fire. If it's been at least an inch farther away, would have been total coldness. So the Earth is rightly placed at an exact distance from the sun. So who is the one who is designing all this? So that means there is someone who is beyond, who is an ultimate controller, and that's what we term as GOD: generator, originator, and destroyer. GOD, God. And that's how he tried to convince him. And yeah, so just to add to what Prabhuji just mentioned, that we just look for immediate truth, but there's also something uh, driven meaningfully if we get into the deeper insights of it. Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, actually, all evidence points to the fact that there was a creator, and that this didn't come by chance. If you just look around, you can see that in the order that is all around us in nature. Whose nature is it for it to work so timely, to have such a system? Yeah, and actually, the atheist, he's not making that claim out of knowledge, but it's just out of complete ignorance. Because to actually make such a claim, you better have exhausted every single avenue of searching for God, But no, these people, Prabhupada says in this world there's the cheated and then there's the cheater. And this is simply just a cop out to enjoy your senses, to whimsically behave in whatever way you wish to not take the direction that's given by God in the revealed scriptures, by Krishna in these books, mainly the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. It's just a way to do what it is that you want, separate from Him. And yeah, there's no knowledge there behind those claims. And
As you're saying, about enjoying material senses, I kind of reflect on just how many, great personalities, in our current age, that had name, fame, wealth, prestige, end up taking their own life because ultimately they weren't happy. I mean, it's like a good example, like Robin Williams. He brought joy and laughter to so many millions of people. He had a great life. He had name, fame, and prestige. He had wealth. He had family. But in the end, that wasn't enough. And you look at so many, musicians and actors that have taken their own life. And they had it all. They had, they should have been at the peak of, happiness. But there is a common thread that you always see with these scenarios is that they still needed drugs. They still needed alcohol. They still needed all these external things to be happy. So yeah, it's finding happiness in the material world is very, very temporary, and it's more like you're suffocating.
Yeah, so I think it is like being part of that 99th club. You heard of that? So it's called the 99th club. What it means is, despite, at least in the material sense, whatever we try to achieve, whatever we try to attain, we feel as if there's something lacking. We get this, we think, okay, there's something next. It's like having uh, the donkey having a carrot in front of it. It just thinks it's going to get it. It runs. The carrot is still at the same distance. So it keeps running, keeps running. So the 99th club, the anecdote goes in such a way that, yeah, we would get certain happiness, but that cannot give us the ultimate happiness. Because I heard Radhesham Prabhu telling that, okay, the material happiness would seem to be happiness, but how much and how long is the question we must always ask. For example, even if you're tasting sweets, how much and how long can we eat it? Can we just keep eating? No, there is a limit to it. After a certain time, so after a certain time, what essentially happen is, uh, in Hindi they say muh maar jana. I don't know if someone knows. Once we start eating something at a certain point of time, we will not feel like eating. So because our in a material nature we are limited, but if we tend to move towards something substantial and spiritual, that is what will give us the everlasting joy, and therefore there's a process meant for it. So yeah, that's what I thought of sharing.
Yeah, everything material has a saturation point, and well, eventually there'll come a time where you have to reject that very thing which was pleasurable. What's sweet in the beginning turns bitter, turns poisonous. Exactly. Yeah, nectar in the beginning, poison in the end. And then, when it comes to actually purifying our senses and taking the role of the sadhaka, undergoing spiritual discipline under the guidance of spiritual master and parampara, then, though it feels like poison in the beginning, it begins to get sweeter and sweeter and eventually tastes like nectar. This material enjoyment, there's another example given, which is pretty much the exact same, but it's the enjoyment in the material world is compared to like a deer who's running after a mirage in a desert, right? And Prabhupada has a lecture called "There's Water in the Desert." There's water, and this is one of my favorite lectures because he's speaking from the view of the materialist, or from what the materialist hears. We hear this promise in the material world that if we just buckle down a little bit harder, then we can enjoy. If we just work a little bit harder, if we have a big enough family, or if we have a great enough job, or if we look the right part, if we get the girl, if we get the car, then we'll enjoy. But Prabhupada says this material world is a desert, and there's nothing but a drop of enjoyment here. So it's like we're a deer chasing after this illusion, this phantasmagoria. We see water in the distance, and we're chasing like anything to go and actually drink from it, but we die along the way, and that's a guarantee. For someone who's chasing that fantasy, there's nothing but death, and death, and death, and birth, and birth, and so many times over, until we finally get pulled out of that predicament. And this is, this is why we're here, is because somehow or other we've been. It's our good fortune that we've been brought here to Rupanuga Vedic College, and now we have an opportunity to reach for the hand that's grabbing for us, to lift us out of this desert, desert of sense enjoyment. So, is there anyone else wants to say anything?
Bhagavad Gita ki jai.